Before we get started, here's a quick rundown of what you can expect today. So we'll be discussing 3 main topics over the next 35 to 45 minutes. One being defining high-performing teams, so building teams that deliver value efficiently. Scaling success, so strategies for growing and maintaining success. And culture, diversity, and improvement, so creating a thriving, innovative environment. At the end of the session, we'll wrap up and share how you can continue the conversation with Aaron and the rest of the group. Please feel free to use the LinkedIn chat to say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from, and share any questions that you have as we go along. And if you have any thoughts or questions, don't hesitate to drop them into the chat, as we'll be sure to follow up and address them after the session. Okay, so over to you, Yannicka.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So yeah, again, also thank you for joining, Aaron. And before I really go into all the topics that Stephanie just took us through, could you maybe take us a little bit through your professional journey?
Certainly, yes. It's a bit of a windy road, but I'll try to make it as straight and simple as possible. So, I like to think of my career in kind of 3 sections. So, interestingly enough, I actually have an undergrad in English, so nothing to do with anything that I do today. I guess, most of us speak it and use it, but outside of that, the first 5 years of my career was really focused on learning and just being open and available to opportunities. And so really around that time, I was a network engineer, a sysadmin, basically help desk, doing anything I could to learn about technology, learn about change, learn about teaming. And then, as many of us who've gone through Agile and Agile transformations and being part of teams, I was actually moving into being a software engineer. And I like to say I had Agile done to me, brute force the first time. So part of a team, a director of engineering came in and said, hey, we're going to go Agile. We did a bunch of training over a weekend. On Monday, we flipped. And as you'd imagine, it started out pretty rocky, but ultimately it got pretty well. And that kind of took me into my next phase of my career, if you will, the next 10 years, which was gaining depth. So I really then went through and did a bunch of different jobs. So did a bunch of different things. Was software engineer, QA engineer. I also was a product manager, product owner, which are very different. I was I was basically a project manager, anything you could imagine to get depth in different roles and responsibilities. And what I started to find was when I was doing that, people always started to find out, oh, that Agile stuff, oh, that teaming stuff, oh, how to drive transformations. So I also had a second job or a side job, which was being part of some team that was trying to either prove out or articulate the importance of building good teams, thinking about giving teams the opportunity, autonomy to deliver. And so that kind of moved me into this phase that I'm in now for about the last 15 years, which is driving transformation. So I started small scale, a couple of teams, a couple of groups, and then ultimately moving forward and moving all the way through enterprise transformations at a lot of large financial institutions, and really focusing now on synthesizing and applying that learning and that depth and experience, and then also sharing it both in one, trying to help build scale high performing teams, and the other is to build others that can do the same.
Wow, yeah, that is very interesting. And it's also nice, and you see, you come from English and you end up in the Agile space. And now at JPMorganChase, you are the global head for an Agile Center for Enablement. What does that mean?
That it sounds great when you say it. That's and if you have ideas on that, I'd love to hear it. But no, seriously, it means that every single day is different. Ultimately, my responsibility is to help drive transformation across the organization. So primarily with our enterprise technology group and global technology. but ultimately being a proponent for change, being somebody who is either directly or indirectly helping to improve our results that we're able to deliver. And notice I specifically left out anything around frameworks or practices or things like that, because those are really just solutions to problems. And so ultimately, that's a lot of what my day is really being curious and trying to frame problems and reframe problems, trying to understand opportunities and constraints, and really lean in on the areas that we can actually affect change and be more effective and efficient in delivering. Also, a lot of relationship management, making sure that people are talking, people are communicating, people, when they are communicating, the message that they think they're sending is actually being received. And I do that a lot in my organization and in my role. I spend a lot of time and reserve a lot of my day in meeting with people, talking with people, just understanding and getting to know what they're going through. Because again, it goes back to that being curious, just having regular conversations. You'd be surprised at the things you learn and the information you could start to piece together, and the problems aren't always as big as they might first present.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Aaron. I mean, it sounds like your experience and your knowledge on this is so lengthy. So it's so great to hear about your journey and the impact of Agile transformation at scale. So if we were to shift our focus to a key part of that transformation being high performing teams, so from your perspective, what categorizes a high performing team today? So what traits, behaviors, or mindsets stand out as a must-have from your perspective?
Yes, so those are two related but different things, and I'll kind of answer and talk about them both. The most important thing for any high performing team is delivering business results effectively and efficiently. And bar none, all the other things that you'd look at are going to be indicators or contraindicators of how they're doing. Too many people focus on doing a practice or a process perfectly or right and forget about the fact that there's an outcome or there's something that they're trying to deliver or something they're trying to do. And so it's really about focusing on that. And so that's a lot of the things that I look for, and that people I work with and teams that we talk to and work with look for is, first and foremost, are you delivering? Because ultimately that's the first thing we need to do. So that's a trait we look for, is, are you delivering? And if so, okay, well then now let's start to dig in and say, okay, well, what's working well? What's going well? And then what are the challenges? Are the challenges internal inside the team? Are they external? Are they system, meaning that there's things outside your control? Are they things that have to do with other teams or dependencies? So really looking at those things, but ultimately, trying to really think about it in that regard. And I'm a huge avid sports fan, and I talk. Anybody that works with me or has talked with me knows I use a lot of analogies to talk about this kind of stuff. And this kind of topic, or this area, really reminds me of a golfer. He's still actually a golfer now. He's on the Champions Tour, by the name of Jim Furyk. And so ultimately, the big thing with him was that he had what was described as like a really awkward and weird swing. It was just, if you ever go out, you can YouTube him and see it. It's just an awkward swing. It doesn't look like the perfect kind of swing that you see from golf. But he won 17 PGA Tour tour tournaments and one major. And the important part of that was, it doesn't matter how you draw the club face back. What matters is that it's square when you hit the ball, when you swing, and that determines where the ball is going to go. And so that is really the most important thing. Again, if you're delivering value, that's important. So don't focus on, well, we're not doing it the best or not. Yeah, you could try to tweak it a little bit, but if you're actually getting the results and getting the results in the way you need, then sometimes it's say, okay, well, hey, how can we do that more efficiently and effectively, versus you have to do it exactly like they say in some book or something somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not a huge golf fan, but you've made me now want to go into YouTube to check out this guy's swing. So, okay, so I guess once we understand what makes a high performing team, the next question would be, how do we enable that success? So how do you see Agile lean practices intersecting with building high-performing teams?
Yes, another very, very good question, Stephanie. So the important part of that is thinking about those as ways that you can actually ensure that you're going to deliver in a way that you want. So think of them as, as instructions in a recipe would be the best way to say it. So the mechanics and the practices, they're the techniques, they're the things that you want to really be able to leverage, but also you really have to think about the fact that they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. They help you, and they help you with continuous improvement. They help you with delivering. They help you make sure that you're on the right path. But really what you should be looking for and what you should be doing is you should really be saying, okay, well, again, are we delivering? Are we able to deliver? And what are the things and the techniques that we need to use to be able to do that? And so lean and agile are, and by agile, often it's Scrum or, less or DAD or SAFe or any of those. Those are the ones, and you can look at that and say, okay, great, we're starting here. These are things that are going to give us ideas, but ultimately we really want to make sure that the outcome and the results are what we're trying to get. And so I always think about them that way. I always think about them as like, those are good things to understand, good things to know, but we shouldn't be trying to follow them like to the letter all the time. We start there. Sure. And then we want to move and improve and continually get better.
Okay, so I mean, building these teams is one thing, right? But recognizing their progress is just as important. So what early sign or signal, should I say, or metrics would you look for when gauging if a team is on track to becoming a high-performing team?
Yes, so metrics are always an important topic for me. I love them. I even though I was an English major, I'm a data guy. But I also recognize that they can be incredibly useful, but they can also be incredibly dangerous. In the wrong hands, they can be used as a sword or a shield, and they shouldn't be used as either. They're signals that really indicate where we're going and where we're headed, and how we should potentially adjust. And so what I tend to look for in high performing teams, outside of the traditional metrics that you'd see, which would be throughput, which would be cycle time, which would be, I don't look at some of the vanity metrics around like velocity or things of that measure. Those are important, but they basically tell me certain things about how I'm doing activities, not how I'm delivering value or delivering results. So I tend to look at those metrics more on like throughput, cycle time, process time, all those kind of things to see that. But the things that I really look for and really dig in, and it's not an easy thing to do, which is, are there authentic conversations happening? What are the team dynamics? What's the system that they're working in? Are they being heard? Is there actual improvement? Are leaders leaning in? Are leaders coming in? How many shoulder taps do they get? Do they understand what's going on? Can they tie the work that they're doing to a strategic objective or a strategic goal? So simply asking those kind of questions like, hey, what are you working on? Okay. And what value does that deliver? And I'm listening for, okay, well, we're able to actually allow customers to do X, Y, Z versus, oh, well, that means that we have a new cart that we can, deliver or something like that. So it's really those things that I look for in high performing teams is first and foremost. And then all the other ones tend to be the ones that I look at to say, okay, if they're doing well, where do I look to kind of understand where they're doing well and what we could potentially synthesize across the organization or across the group, and where might they be struggling that we can help. And then also where might we see patterns that others are struggling with, and maybe it's systematic, or maybe it's something that we can help with, so like solve it for the system, which would solve it for multiple teams.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That's indeed also a great segue indeed to our next focus area, where it comes to indeed to the next step, or maybe challenge, as you can also describe it. And once you have established those high performance teams, how are you going to scale and actually sustain the success across the organization, as you just mentioned? Where does leadership come into play when scaling high performance teams?
Yes, Yannicka. So leadership is critical in actually scaling high performing teams. And this is where I tend to now spend a good bit of my time, which is really helping to educate leaders understand that high performing teams have to be led differently. It requires them to change the way that they lead. And so you have to create an environment that is supportive of innovation and exploration and some autonomy. But the challenge here, and this is an interesting thing to all of my agile practitioners, I would say, we that are agile practitioners or that drive transformations outside of frameworks, we have to stop like saying and sharing like, well, you just need to leave the teams alone, give them autonomy and let them deliver and let them do things. Like that's just not realistic in a large scaled environment. It's just not going to be. Like one of those things that we really have to think about is it's incredibly complex in an environment to be able to deliver across that environment consistently. Can you do that in 4, 5, 16, something like that? Absolutely. But when you're talking the scale of some of the transformation, some of the places that I've done when in worked and driven transformation, when you're talking 4,000, 5,000, 8,000 teams, it's just not realistic to say, leave them all alone and let them deliver. And so what leaders have to understand and what leaders have to realize and what we as practitioners and actual people that are executing, delivering is this concept of structured autonomy that I like to talk about, which is that's where you get the idea of leaving the teams alone and letting them be, self-directing, if you will. It's the idea of here are the boundaries, here are the guardrails, here are the places where you do need to reach out and you do need to check in and you do need to come back to a leader for help or for answers. But inside of that, you're able to go and move fast and be innovative. And it's that nice blend and that idea of the kind of intentional and emergent design or intentional and emergent transformation where there's certain things that are actually structured, but there's a lot that can emerge inside of that. And so it's important as leaders that we understand that and that we allow that. And as teams and team members and people that drive transformation, we also understand that. And one last point about that is that, when driving transformation, the other thing that we have to think about, and when we're trying to build high scaling teams, high performing teams, and really deliver, is the fact that many of the people in the leadership role, they got there because they were able to navigate the chaos. They were able to overcome the challenges. They were able to get results in a complex world. And then we show up and say, either as as a person driving transformation, oh, we're going to fix all that. Don't worry about it. We'll clean all that up. That's terrible. It's fantastic. Or as a team, it's like, hey, leave us alone. Let us go do it. Let us figure that out. And what we're not thinking about is we're not being empathetic, and we're not thinking, well, that leader is sitting there going, well, what in the world am I going to do? And my career has been built on being able to navigate all of this stuff and everything. And so we really have to be a bit empathetic and think about that and say, hey, listen, here are the things that you're actually going to be able to do. You're not going to have to focus on activities and providing orders and, talking to the team and telling them what to do and solving low-level problems. You can start to focus on the strategic part of what we're doing is how does this hook and connect? What are the next things that should do in a roadmap? How should we connect? What is new technology that we should be thinking about? All of those pieces are pieces that we should be able to share with leaders and have leaders thinking about. But ultimately, we need the leaders to realize that they do need to lead differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a change, I presume, for a lot of companies.
Yes.
I can imagine. And for a lot of leaders as well, right? They grow in a certain area and they need to grow while they're leading. And you often also see that a lot of organizations can build one of those really strong teams. But they struggle to scale that success throughout the rest of the organization. Any idea why that is and how you address it? You kind of alluded already to it, but
yes. So the challenge is, and one of the things is that I think we force this idea of consistency a little too hard and a little too much, and that groups need to do things exactly the same. High performing teams and high performing organizations that really achieve true agility, not agile practice, but true agility of being able to deliver the right things in the right way at the right time, understand and learn how to exploit variability. So let me explain that for a second. Variability is not a bad thing. Inconsistency is. So what that means is it's not a problem if teams do things differently, as long as they arrive at the same place with the things that they need to do at the prescribed time. And so being pragmatic and principled about how we're doing things and not being overly prescriptive about everybody has to do it this way, it has to use this template and has to, do all these things. That is the way you want to go. That enables effective scaling. That allows for some of that autonomy, some of that innovation, some of that emergent great delivery and scaling that we're talking about. And I use an example often when trying to help people understand this thought, which is, if we all on the call had decided that we're all going to go to a location, let's pick Banff, or let's pick LA, or let's pick anyone, let's pick any place that we'd like. But we all said, hey, we're going to land at this place, and we're going to go to this place, and we need to be there a week from today at 5 o'clock, and we're doing a black tie event, and 5 o'clock p.m. their time, a black tie event, and you kind of put those kind of requirements out. At that point, we should let everybody figure out how they could get there and how they should get there. We shouldn't say everybody needs to fly. They need to take this specific flight on this airline at this time, and they need to pack these things and do all those kind of things. What we are saying is we're leaving it up to you to figure out how to get there and manage it effectively. We believe there's a most effective way to do that, and that's this. But you're empowered to go and do however you want. If you want to do it in a way that's less efficient, that I think is less efficient, and let's say you want to take a bus there, well, okay, that's fine, as long as you meet those prescribed requirements, if you will. And maybe you do that because for you, you don't like to fly, or you're terrified of flying. And so that's actually the right way for you to do it. But I think that is the way to actually really scale high performing teams across an organization, is to have the things that you actually have to be prescriptive about be as few as possible, no more than exactly what you need, and everything else should be principles, and empower the leaders and the teams and the groups to be able to define how they get there based on their constraints.
That's really nice. I made some notes for myself, and I like that analogy as well. I will be one that takes the bus, terrified of flying. So, but looking at that, then you mentioned it indeed, empowerment, really big thing, structure and empowerment. What role does executive sponsorship and organizational alignment play then?
Yes. So a great way to really think about this, and a great way to focus on it, is to understand that very often those inside the system are not empowered to change the system. And so that's where executive sponsorship and executives come in. It's because they are the ones that actually need to be able to change the system. We need to convince them to change the system and why it's valuable. The other thing that executive sponsorship helps and makes it's really important is we need those executive sponsors to go talk to their peers, so that their peers actually are part of the change and understand that the change they need to make. Too often we're part of change where it's, executives and senior leaders say, we need to change. And by we need to change, they mean you need to change. And so it's really important to say, no, we all need to change. And here's how we need to do it, or here's what we need to do. Here's the coaching we need, or here are the practices, or here are the things that we really need to think about. I know this item is very important and valuable to you, or this forum, or this process, or this practice, but that is actually inefficient, or that is actually slowing us down, or that is actually creating confusion or animosity, or those things. So here, those are things that we need to change. And so those are conversations that executives can have with other executives, because they're in the rooms and in the conversations. They can also actually understand and bring information and bring clarity, and they're empowered to actually make space for change and make space for transformation. Because again, too often, as you heard me talk about it early in my career, transformation and change and improvement becomes a side job or part of your job. So you do your full-time job, and oh, by the way, somehow figure out and fit in this other thing to drive change. And if it's truly important, if it's truly something that we need to do, the idea then is that we have to make the time for that. We have to be willing to do that. And for those of us that are on the other side, that are actually trying to get executive sponsorship or trying to articulate the importance, take a lesson from me that I learned in that middle part of my career, gaining depth, which is we need to make sure that we frame the things that we're doing in value and what we're wanting and what we're trying to do, and talking about like the things and the results that we're going to get. Don't frame it in activities. Don't frame it in, well, we want to do this, or, hey, everybody's saying it does this or does that. We need to be very tight and crisp and clear about we're doing this because we have this challenge and we believe that this is going to solve it. We've done these things to prove it out on a small scale, and we want to actually amplify that and talk about the results, talk about the values. Also, when you talk to them to help get that executive sponsorship, also really start talking about the things that they do today or they get today and how they'll get those in the future. So that's another thing that early in my career, I made the mistake of not really actually saying, hey, you get these 5 things today in this way, and here is how you'll actually get them in the future. And here, or you're not going to get them in the future, and here's why. Because that's also a good conversation to have. And that's where a good executive sponsor will come in to say, hey, it's okay not getting those, because that actually is an anti-pattern or something that's stopping us or slowing us down. And so it's okay to do that. And then just the last thing that I've grown to appreciate as I've grown in my career and moved up is that one other thing for us practitioners is recognize and realize that when we go to executives and senior leaders with these opportunities or with these asks, recognize that they get asks and opportunities all day, every day. And in isolation, they sound great, and yeah, that's fantastic and all that kind of stuff. But when you start to actually talk about those relative to other opportunities, they actually might not be that great, or they might not be the most important thing. So make sure that when you actually go and talk about these ideas, that you've done the work, you've done your homework, you are able to explain, well, in the realm or relation, related to all these other things we're doing, you go back to, here's why we should do this. Here's the value it provides. Here's the results we'll get. Here are the things that we're targeting, and we're not looking to go big bang. Here is what we're going to do to prove that out and get social proof. And then once we get social proof and we can actually show those results and see that that's working, this is where we want to amplify it. And if it doesn't, it's a small test, it's a small experiment, it's a small investment, and we're able to then move on and find another way to solve it or to do it.
Thank you, Aaron. I mean, these are all critical points, especially when we think about broader culture and continuous improvement that support high-performing teams. So let's shift our focus onto that now. So you've touched on some of these points, but as we consider leadership role, culture becomes a key enabler of success. How do you ensure continuous improvement is truly embedded into the team's DNA rather than it being a tick box or a checkbox exercise?
Yes, and that goes to really taking a look at the system and really understanding and saying that, is the system actually enabling the behaviors that we want? And very often we think about things in the motivation perspective. Are people motivated? Do they want to do this? It does it all the great things that, like, hey, wouldn't this be great if we do X, Y, Z? But what we don't often think about is, do they have the skills to be able to do it? So, like, do they understand? Are they capable of actually doing the things? And then also, is the system actually set up to make it that they can do it? Like, if you were constantly trying to sweep a floor, so to speak, or something like that, and a fan was blowing the dust right back, somebody would look and go, well, you guys aren't continuously improving because you keep in the same problems, having the same problems. It's like, no, the system is set up. Somebody move the fan, and then you'll see that, like, I'm actually trying to do this, but I'm not able to because of all the things around me. And so a lot of that is really looking at, okay, well, is the team doing the things that they need to do? Are they focused on it? And then look and say, is the system enabling that? And then look at peers and partners and say, and what happens when they say this? Are they actually being shouted down? Are they being told that they're silly? Are they being told that this won't work? And so, the peers and the quote unquote peer pressure is stopping them from making those changes. Rarely is it that somebody doesn't want to change. It's often that either the system or their peers stop them from changing. And so it's really, and they get beaten down and they stop doing it. And so I would always look at that and say, okay, first and foremost, is the team trying to change? And are they continuously trying to change? Are they tracking that? Are they clear? And it doesn't have to be huge changes, it could be small changes, but are they actually really trying to do it? Do they see it? Do they have a culture inside the team of trying to be better, of constantly challenging the things to get better? And then if they are, but it doesn't seem like it's changing, then take a look at the peers and the groups around them and the partner people that they interact with regularly, and then take a look at the system to say, are they able to do it? And that starts to get into relationships and psychological safety and the organizational performance and purpose and all those other things that we traditionally hear and talk about and are talked about. But it really ultimately kind of comes back to be able to embed it in the culture and the DNA. It has to be part of those three levels: the people doing it, the people that are around and supporting or helping do it, and then the system that they work within. All of those have to be aligned to be able to actually really embed DNA in the culture.
Well, okay. Looking at the time, I of course want to see, looking ahead, right? What do you see actually as the next frontier or evolution in building high-performing teams, especially in large enterprises? You mentioned you have you'd have to think about size of 4,000, 5,000 teams.
Yes. So there's a lot of it wouldn't be a LinkedIn conversation or any real conversation these days if we didn't say something about AI, right? So in generative AI specifically, but I think that is actually the thing that's going to be interesting and kind of the future of what we're doing. And I'm not going to talk about and make predictions on what it'll do or whether it's good or not or whatever. What I'm going to talk about is the idea of the fact that it has the opportunity to make changes and drive changes to what we do and how we do things. I am always a proponent and always have been a proponent. My background, early in that first 5 years where I was gaining depth and stuff like that, I actually did help desk support back at GE when they were going through their Six Sigma days and heavy lean. So my background is primarily started in lean and then moved to Agile.
Mhm.
So I always think about this idea of removing waste from the system. And I often talk with my team and talk with people about this idea of reducing or removing commoditized work, things that actually it costs you, or you could be more effective and efficient if something else did it. And especially if it's repeatable and it's you can actually be intentional in delivering it, and it's not an empirical thing where you have to test and learn. That's like the important thing. And I think that's where AI is going to be incredibly valuable, incredibly useful, in that there are things that you could say are commoditized or that are repeatable that it could actually start to do. And then it can actually start to get into some of the more complex interpretations on things that we're doing. But I still believe that there's going to be a lot of art left in scaling high performance teams, in being able to drive transformations, to drive change, to get people to work together. Because no matter what, it's knowledge work and it's people. So all of the information could point to it should be this, and for whatever reason it's not this. And so there is still that part of it that is really going to still be the complex part, the thing that I think AI is still a long way away from. And then the other thing I think about when I think about like the future of high performing teams and scaling and stuff is really kind of getting away from pure and specific frameworks and getting into solving problems. Listen, frameworks, as you kind of heard me say about it before, frameworks, methodologies, all those things are solutions to problems. And we need to really focus on the problems. We need to really frame the problems, make sure we're framing them effectively and accurately. And we're not just ultimately kind of just, oh yeah, this is this, so we're going to go do it. And, too often we fall in love with the solution and not the problem. And it needs to be the other way around. And we talk about that a lot, of really exploring and understanding that problem. And so those are two things that I would say are really going, thinking more about AI and thinking less about specific frameworks and checking the box and checklists, and jumping really more into, okay, how can I bring the right tool to something to be able to solve it, to actually be able to deliver, to actually be able to drive and deliver results.
And that's also where your curiosity comes in, right?
Yes.
Yes, it's good to be curious to understand that problem. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I just want to leave with one question before we go off. If you could give everybody here one piece of advice when they are trying to transform their teams right now, what would that be?
Yes. I guess it would probably be a bit of the theme that you've heard me kind of share throughout, which is being principle-based and outcome-focused. Really focusing on the principles. What are the first principles? What are the principles of the things we're trying to do? Like, can we articulate, these are the principles, like this is how we do work, this is how we interact, this is what we're trying to do, this is why we're together. And then being outcome focused, focus on the outcome. What are the outcomes we're trying to deliver? And then build from there the practices and the things you need to do to be able to do that effectively. And so I would, and that's advice I give to everyone on anything you're doing, regardless of role, regardless of responsibilities, is always be principle-based and outcome focused, and really use those as the way, as an anchor point to be able to come back to and say, okay, are we meeting our principles? Are we doing that? And are we achieving our outcomes?
I think that's really good advice, Aaron. And it's also, so it's a perfectly, just to summarize everything we've discussed today. And you've gone into detail around so much. So this is summarized. So we've spoke about high performing teams and how they're defined by delivering the right value efficiently. So you spoke about early signs of these teams, including the authentic conversations, the psychological safety, and the consistent delivery of results. We spoke about scaling success. So it requires leadership to foster that innovation and autonomy with complementary approaches across the teams. So the executive sponsorship is key to driving change, especially during critical decisions. And third, the culture, diversity, and continuous improvements thrive when teams are given that space to grow. So the psychological safety, again, is to ensure the efforts align with the organisation's purpose. So Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your valuable experience and insights with us today. We encourage everyone who's online with us to connect with Aaron and each other through LinkedIn, and to share the conversation into more insights outside of this webinar session. So yeah, thank you, Aaron. And thank you for joining today's session. So if you found this discussion insightful, don't miss out on future up and coming events with Accelerate. So next Monday, we've got Neil Martin from Accelerate, who will lead the Data Foundations for High Performance workshop, and he'll cover how to deliver business insights, execute high performance data strategies, and unlock the full potential of your teams. So I'll share the registration key link shortly with our audience. And also stay tuned for our high performance leadership series featuring Derek Smith from Aberdeen Asset Management, where he'll discuss building a digital first financial ecosystem. So the date on that one's to be confirmed, but keep an eye out on LinkedIn for further updates on that one. And again, we hope to see you all there, and that you've taken a lot of value from what Aaron has shared with us today. So thank you both, Yannicka and Aaron.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.